chapters 8 through 11 of Tristram Shandy, Volume 3. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ted Drury. The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman, Volume 3, by Laurence Sterne, chapters 8 through 11. Chapter 8. Stay. I have a small account to settle with the reader before Trim can go on with his harangue. It shall be done in 2 minutes. Amongst many other book debts, all of which I shall discharge in due time, I own myself a debtor to the world for 2 items, a chapter upon chambermaids and buttonholes, which in the former part of my work I promised and fully intended to pay off this year, but some of your worships and reverences telling me that the 2 subjects, especially so connected together, might endanger the morals of the world, I pray the chapter upon chambermaids and buttonholes may be forgiven me, and that they will accept of the last chapter in lieu of it, which is nothing, an it please your reverence, but a chapter of chambermaids, green gowns, and old hats. Trim took his hat off the ground, put it upon his head, and then went on with his oration upon death, in manner and form following. Chapter 9. To us, Jonathan, who know not what want or care is, who live here in the service of 2 of the best masters, bating in my own case his Majesty King William III, whom I had the honour to serve in both Ireland and Flanders, I own it, that from Whitsuntide to within 3 weeks of Christmas, 'tis not long, 'tis like nothing. But to those, Jonathan, who know what death is, and what havoc and destruction he can make before a man can well wheel about, 'tis like a whole age. Oh, Jonathan, 'twould make a good-natured man's heart bleed, to consider, continued the corporal, standing perpendicularly, how low many a brave and upright fellow has been laid since that time. And trust me, Susie, added the corporal, turning to Susanna, whose eyes were swimming in water, before that time comes round again, many a bright eye will be dim. Susanna placed it to the right side of the page. She wept, but she curtsied too. Are we not, continued Trim, looking still at Susanna, are we not like a flower of the field, a tear of pride stolen betwixt every 2 tears of humiliation, else no tongue could have described Susanna's affliction. Is not all flesh grass? 'Tis clay, 'tis dirt. They all looked directly at the scullion. The scullion had just been scouring a fish kettle. It was not fair. What is the finest face that ever man looked at? I could hear Trim talk so for ever, cried Susanna. What is it? Susanna laid her hand upon Trim's shoulder, but corruption. Susanna took it off. Now I love you for this, and 'tis this delicious mixture within you which makes you dear creatures what you are, and he who hates you for it, all I can say of the matter is, that he either has a pumpkin for his head, or a pippin for his heart, and whenever he is dissected 'twill be found so. Chapter 10. Whether Susanna, by taking her hand too suddenly from off the corporal's shoulder, by the whisking about of her passions, broke a little the chain of his reflections, or whether the corporal began to be suspicious he had got into the doctor's quarter, and was talking more like the chaplain than himself, or whether, for in all such cases a man of invention in parts may with pleasure fill a couple pages with suppositions, which of all these was the cause, let the curious physiologist, or the curious anybody determine. 'Tis certain, at least, the corporal went on thus with his harangue. For my own part, I declared that out of doors I value not death at all. Not this, added the corporal, snapping his fingers, but with an air which no one but the corporal could have given to the sentiment. In battle, I value death not this, and let him not take me cowardly, like poor Joe Gibbons, in scouring his gun. What is he? A pull of a trigger, a push of a bayonet, an inch this way or that, makes the difference. Look along the line. To the right, see, Jack's down. Well, 'tis worth a regiment of horse to him. No, 'tis Dick. Then Jack's no worse. Never mind which, we pass on. In hot pursuit, the wound itself which brings him is not felt. The best way is to stand up to him. The man who flies is in 10 times more danger than the man who marches up into his jaws. I have looked him, added the corporal, 100 times in the face, and know what he is. He's nothing, Obadiah, at all in the field. But he's very frightful in a house, quoth Obadiah. I never mind it myself, said Jonathan, upon a coach-box. It must, in my opinion, be most natural in bed, replied Susanna. And I could escape him by creeping into the worst calf-skin that ever was made into a knapsack, I would do it there, said Trim. But that is nature. Nature is nature, said Jonathan. And that is the reason, cried Susanna, I so much pity my mistress. She will never get the better of it. Now I pity the captain the most of any one in the family, answered Trim. Madam will get the ease of heart in weeping, and the squire in talking about it. But my poor master will keep it all in silence to himself. I shall hear him sigh in his bed for a whole month together, as he did for Lieutenant Lefevre. And please your honour, do not sigh so piteously, I would say to him, as I laid beside him. I cannot help it, Trim, my master would say. 'Tis so melancholy an accident. I cannot get it off my heart. Your honour fears not death yourself, I hope. Trim, I fear nothing, he would say, but the doing a wrong thing. Well, he would add, whatever betides, I will take care of Lefevre's boy. And with that, like a quieting draught, his honour would fall asleep. I like to hear Trim's stories about the captain, said Susanna. He is a kindly-hearted gentleman, said Obadiah, as ever lived. Ay, and as brave a one, too, said the corporal, as ever stepped before a platoon. There never was a better officer in the king's army, or a better man in God's world. For he would march up to the mouth of a cannon, though he saw the lighted match at the very touch-hole. And yet for all that he has a heart as soft as a child for other people. He would not hurt a chicken. I would sooner, quoth Jonathan, drive such a gentleman for 7 pounds a year, than some for 8. Thank thee, Jonathan, for thy 20 shillings. As much, Jonathan, said the corporal, shaking him by the hand, as if thou had put the money into my own pocket. I would serve him to the day of my death, out of love. He is a friend and a brother to me. And could I be sure my poor brother Tom was dead, continued the corporal, taking out his handkerchief, was I worth 10,000 pounds, I would leave every shilling of it to the captain. Trim could not refrain from tears at this testamentary proof he gave of his affection to his master. The whole kitchen was affected. Do tell us the story of the poor lieutenant, said Susanna. With all my heart, answered the corporal. Susanna, the cook, Jonathan, Obadiah, and Corporal Trim formed a circle about the fire, and as soon as the scullion had shut the kitchen door, the corporal begun. Chapter 11. I am a Turk, if I had not as much forgot my mother, as if nature had plastered me up and set me down naked upon the banks of the river Nile, without one. Your most obedient servant, madam. I've cost you a great deal of trouble. I wish it may answer, but you have left a crack in my back. Here's a great piece fallen off here before. And what must I do with this foot? I shall never reach England with it. For my own part, I never wonder at any thing, and so often has my judgment deceived me in my life that I always suspect it right or wrong. At least I am seldom hot upon cold subjects. For this I reverence truth as much as anybody. And when it has slipped us, if a man will but take me by the hand, and go quietly in search for it, as for a thing we have both lost, and can neither of us do well without, I will go to the world's end with him. But I hate disputes, and therefore, bating religious points, or such as touch society, I would almost subscribe to anything which does not choke me in the first passage, rather than be drawn into one. But I cannot bear suffocation, and bad smells worst of all, for which reasons I resolved from the beginning, that if ever the army of martyrs was to be augmented, or a new one raised, I would have no hand in it one way or the other. End of chapters 8 through 11.